What do you make of Lady Susan Hussey? Was the way she questioned the woman at Buckingham Palace, was she being a racist?
Yes, she was indeed. So it's actually called covert racism in the form of a micro-invalidation, which is what I talk about. So ultimately, when you go up to a person and say, where are you from? Know where you're really from. What you're inferring is that they possibly couldn't identify as British due to the colour of their skin, which means that you're leading with racial prejudice. And if you lead with racial prejudice, you are a racist.
Wasn't she just being curious?
No, like I said, where are you from is curious. Once you're given an answer as Ngozi, rather, and several others have explained, once you're given an answer, you accept that answer. When you try to pry and you refuse to accept an answer, at that point you are now skating on the border of being racially prejudiced, because as far as you are concerned, the answer that she has given is not acceptable from that black person. You would prefer something else. That is racial prejudice.
But this woman, Lady Hussey, has been was with the Queen for what, 61, 62 years. Her job was to often go ahead of her in the crowd and find out about people. She's a racist. Why haven't we heard this before?
We have heard this. OK, so let me just be clear. I have to just throw this out there. So, racism is firmly interwoven into the fabric of society, and that is due to the historical context. So, that includes, or we can safely say that includes the institution that lays at the very heart of it. So let me just break it down. When an institution or an individual fails to make a conscious decision to be anti-racist, what they don't realise is that their racial prejudice will manifest itself automatically, even if they are whether they realise it or not. Okay, and this is typically what we find. This is what many black people have to contend with on a daily basis, and this is also what we saw with Lady Hussey and, of course, with Meghan Markle. We watched the entire, the most powerful institution in this country, gaslight that woman like there was no tomorrow, literally, and they did it with the hint of politeness, British politeness, as you do, and that is what we all witnessed. And hold on a second.
No, how did they gaslight Meghan Markle?
Hold on a second. So, ultimately, when someone comes along and says that they have experienced some form of racism, when another person comes along who isn't from that community or isn't from that cohort and categorically says or dictates that that is not racism, that is a form of gaslighting. It's a form of a micro-invalidation. You are ultimately saying, or ultimately, what you're doing is ignoring, negating and neglecting the thoughts, feelings and experiences of that individual. Let me just break it down to you. You come from a marginalised community. As you said, you are from the LGBTQ+ community. If I was to say to you, or rather, let me put it this way. If you said to me, Iman, I was the victim of a homophobic attack, and you came and told me that, and I tell you, categorically, I dictate to you categorically, as a heterosexual woman, no, Andrew, you are wrong. You are wrong.
So a hate crime, if someone thinks they're a victim of a hate crime, it's a hate crime.
No,
that's it.
It comes down to...
That can't be right.
Well, let's just hear what Queen Camilla said, because Queen Camilla actually put it quite nicely when talking about domestic violence, which is also the same as racism, a heinous crime. What you're supposed to do with survivors and victims is listen and believe. So I would like to lead with what Queen Camilla said. I think what she said was awesome. When talking about domestic violence, which is a heinous crime, we must listen to survivors. We must believe their stories. Racism is a heinous crime. So therefore, we must listen to those survivors and believe their stories. It's as simple as that. And anything other than that, it's microaggressions.
That she has been listened to. It's not really a debate now about whether or not it was racist. The palace clearly thought it was.
Yes.
Thank you, Camilla.
Because the palace said it was deeply regrettable and proffered Lady Susan Hussey's apology for the comments. So, after a very swift investigation, to be fair, they came out and released a pretty robust statement saying, we don't condone this language, this was wrong, and she shouldn't have said it, right? We're now moving on to the next stage, which I think is the most important one, really, which is, what do we now do about it? And I suppose my concern with cases like this is it doesn't help the debate if everyone points and goes, you're a racist, you're cancelled. She's now offered to have a meeting with this lady. It's, of course, up to the lady whether she wants to go ahead with that. But I would personally say, as a sort of outside observer, surely in order to improve this situation, a meeting is the best way to go forward. This lady can educate Lady Susan, who may well be accused of being a woman of her generation. That's not a justification.
Thank you very much, so I don't interject.
And this idea that Miss Fulani doesn't... I don't know how we take this whole situation forward if we can't debate this topic further and have this roundtable. I think sometimes people feel in the space about discussing racism that they're so worried themselves about getting the terminology wrong or saying the wrong thing or having the wrong reaction. I don't understand as well why cancellation is the solution here. Lady Sarah Hussey has made a mistake. We're now living in this society where people can't apologise and properly atone for that. They're cancelled as if, God forbid, they'd committed a much more serious crime. I'm not saying racism isn't serious, but it's not murder, it's not paedophilia. Does it deserve the cancellation of a woman who's given 60 of her years to public service?
Well, I think you're looking at you're looking at the incident as kind of as an isolated incident. Obviously, we have to put it into context. We're ultimately talking about an institution that stems or derives from racism. So I have to throw this out here. The first thing, the reason why everything becomes so contentious and people lead with cancelling is because many people, including myself from the black community, what I have had to do, and many others, I've had to sit patiently, OK, and I've had to watch white people dictate to black people what racism is. You cannot tell me, as a black woman, what racism is. You cannot tell me what racism is. I am here to tell you, just like Meghan with her documentary, she's had to sit and listen to everyone tell her what her reality is. So you know what? Now it's time for her to speak. And just like with black people, you cannot come along and tell me what racism is. I am here to tell you. And the reason why, let me just make it clear for you, she who feels knows it more. African proverb. Please remember that. It will do you justice.
Nobody's tried. I wouldn't for a minute dream as a white woman to tell a black woman what racism is.
You see it.
But I certainly didn't say that in the conversation. What I'm saying is, as deeply regrettable, to quote the Palace, as Lady Sarah's comments were, is it helpful to the debate to see her cancelled and vilified? Or would it not be better to see her educated and rehabilitated?
See, actually, I totally agree with you, and I think we're all in agreement.
Good Lord.
Thank you very much,
This is happening too often on this programme.
We need to stop this.
We can end the discussion shortly. Camilla, I would just make this final point, if you wouldn't mind, Andrew.
Sure.
Just to add on, Camilla, thank you very much for adding that point. I am very much, because I'm a trainer, I'm an anti-racism trainer, my first port of call is to train. It's not to bring contention and not to conflate the situation, it's to educate. And I think, as much as black people, obviously, it's not our duty to educate, in a way, we're somewhat obligated because there are many people that are ignorant. So I don't believe in cancel culture. It's not something that I subscribe to personally. Right. And I do think that she should have been educated, just like the institution. In terms of moving forward, the first thing that you should have done as an institution is make a conscious decision to be anti-racist. Because as I said, an institution or an individual's racial prejudice will manifest itself, whether they understanding or appreciate it or not. The second thing that they need to do is make sure that every individual adheres to the equalities laws and legislations, which is something that the late Queen did not do. And lastly, they have to lead by example, which would ultimately help kill the culture war. So thank you very much.
Let me just say in the last 30 seconds, I think the Palace were brutal to Lady Hussey because she'd worked for the Queen for 62 years. They could have put out the statement apologising. She could meet the woman she offended, who said that she was racially abused.
Because the irony here is because of Megxit, what happened is the Palace turned around and said, we need to be more diverse. We need to be inviting in more people of colour to the Palace. So it doesn't seem like it's shrouded in white privilege.
But it's better than not inviting people of colour into the Palace.
I agree with what you said originally, Andrew, in terms of, I actually will say quite candidly, quite confidently, as a black woman who was a BLM organiser, that was harsh. She's been working. As we know, she's an unpaid 3-year-old woman. She's been working for the Queen. Imagine working for the Queen for 60 years and you get fired because you are perpetuating covert racism, which is very much prevalent within the institution that you work in. It's a scapegoat moment, as far as I'm concerned. I actually feel sorry for the 83-year-old woman.